Hey, it is great seeing all of you out there today. Thank you for joining me to talk a little bit about insects. My name is Jeff Gillman. I'm the director of the UNC Charlotte Botanical Gardens, and talking about insects is one of my absolutely favorite things to do, especially after I've been locked away for about 4 weeks, probably just like you guys have. Now, before we talk about insects, I think it's very important that we spend a little bit of time figuring out what snacks we're going to eat. Right? I mean, we could have potato chips, but I don't actually think they're a good idea. I mean, they're full of fat and stuff. Cheetos, no. Now we could do oranges or bananas or grapefruits. I mean, they're all absolutely wonderful for us, but for a show on insects, no, I don't think so. I think that what we should have today is crickets, and we can do sea salt and vinegar, or we could do sriracha. Which do you think you guys would prefer? The sriracha that's really hot? That's what I like. You know, insects, they're great little creatures. They help pollinate the plants so that we have apples and peaches to eat. They help kill bad insects, which can infect crops. They can go out there and just fill our lives with beauty. Butterflies and bees, and yes, they can also be a healthy snack. So sit back, relax, let's talk about some insects. It is time to talk about insects at the Botanical Gardens. We've picked out a set of 13 insects with all kinds of interesting traits that you're likely to see in your backyard if you look around close enough. So let's take a look at some of these critters that you can find in your backyard and find out some of the interesting things that make them so fascinating to us. Let's start off with a real killer, the assassin bug. The assassin bug is one of the greatest predators out there in the insect world. This guy has this incredible mouth part that loops down underneath of its head. This mouth part can actually be placed into the assassin bug's victim, and the assassin bug can suck out the victim's hemolymph, not blood, hemolymph. Assassin bugs really only attack insects. They love caterpillars, they can attack aphids, and a variety of other insects. Now, an assassin bug is very, very cool to watch, but it is not one that you want to pick up. The assassin bug can put that mouth part into you. Now, they don't have any poison, but if they stick that mouth part into you, it will give you quite a sting. So, this guy is one to be careful of, but not one to ever hurt out there in the garden. Ground beetles are another type of predator that you'll see. If you guys are building an insect house, you'll almost certainly have ground beetles in it. Ground beetles are predators, just like the assassin bug, but they have chewing instead of poking mouth parts. I have never been bitten by a ground beetle, and I don't know anybody who has. They're very safe little critters. But one of the interesting things about ground beetles is that in terms of their speed, they can travel. If they were as long as a cheetah, they would run just about as fast as a cheetah. For their length, they are one of the fastest land animals that you are ever going to see. If you see one out there on the street and give it a poke, you'll see exactly what I mean. These guys are awesome. Ants are one that you're almost certainly going to find. They are one of the most interesting insects out there because, like humans, they live in a society. They all live, they have their mounds, and they're actually queens and workers and soldiers, and they all have these different jobs, just like people do. Although I'm not actually sure that they're able to socially isolate like we do. Very fun creatures. One of the neat things about them is that they, like humans, actually take care of their children. And there are actually places within the ant mound where you will find them caring for their larvae. They'll actually go out into the big world. They'll get things like pollen, nectar, even dead insects, and bring it back to the ant mound for children and for their big ant family. Very, very neat insect. Like ants, termites also have large mounds where they rear their young. Termites are very, very cool because of their ability to digest wood. That chair you're sitting on there, can you just take that chair and tear off a piece of wood and eat it? No, of course you can't. It's wood. That would really, really, really bad for you. But termites can do that. And it's not because they're able to digest it themselves. Termites actually have in their stomachs a bacteria which helps them break down that wood so that they can eat it. Very, very neat. Also very neat that termites live in a big house with a big family just like ants do. The cranefly is probably the most misunderstood insect out there. People see the cranefly and they immediately think, oh my goodness, that's the biggest mosquito I've ever seen. And then after they say that, they do one of two things. They either run really fast or they smack it. Oh, don't smack the poor cranefly. He hasn't done anything. In fact, the cranefly can't do anything. Craneflies do not suck blood. Craneflies actually don't do much of anything as an adult except lay eggs and hatch more craneflies. Their larvae actually lives in the water or in mud in small puddles, and the adult again really doesn't eat much of anything. One of the neat things about flies, all flies, that you can see in this picture on the left is that flies only have one pair of wings and then a second set of things behind the wings, which are called halteres. These look like a little tiny egg on a straw. And that is a special balance organ which helps flies to fly. All flies have them, but in the cranefly you can really see it. Because of these balance organs, the flies are the best flyers in the insects. They're the most efficient insect flyers out there. Cicadas are one that I am sure all of you have seen. Cicadas are neat because they actually live in the ground for a number of years depending on the cicada, and then they hatch out. After they hatch out, they're these large insects which go to different plants and put their tiny little straw-like mouth parts into the plant and suck out the plant's juice. Cicadas are all over the place. I've seen a few of them already this year. And one of the things that I used to do as a kid, and maybe you used to do too, or maybe you do it right now, is to pick the little shells of the cicada off of trees. And you can see that in the lower middle image right here, that brown shell. That brown shell is basically the cicada's old skin after it comes out of the ground and right before it hatches into that big insect that you'll see flying all over the place and landing on things. The biggest wasp that you'll see out there, by the way, is known as the cicada killer. The cicada killer is almost as big as the cicada and actually catches the cicada and takes it home for its young to eat. So the cicada is actually somebody else's meal, just like these crickets that I've got right here are my meal. Paper wasps. If you are putting together an insect house, you will almost certainly see paper wasps. Now the paper wasps may be coming around to build themselves a nest, but more likely they're just coming around to take some of that wood. Just like people, paper wasps will take wood and they'll actually make it into a paper. Now, we don't tend to make this paper then into our house. We tend to use paper for wrapping things or writing, but paper wasps actually make their houses out of paper. And then they'll actually lay eggs in here, and their larvae will actually grow up in these little paper cells and then eventually hatch out as adults. Paper wasps are a little bit aggressive. In fact, they're probably the most aggressive insect that we have on our set of insects here today. Now, generally speaking, if you don't touch them, they won't touch you. But if you go up to their nest and poke it, they will give you a sting. Or if you ever try and grab them, they will give you a sting. So this is a fun insect to watch, but not one to grab and certainly not one to try and pat. Speaking of an insect not to pat, this is the velvet ant. Do not try to pat velvet ants. Oh, I know they look fuzzy. I mean, look at that. It is a cute, fuzzy insect. Don't pat it. Why not? Well, because the velvet ant isn't actually an ant. The velvet ant is actually known as a wasp, a wingless wasp. They are not aggressive. They will not come after you. They are super fun to watch. Do not try and pat it. Do not grab it. They will give you a sting, and it is a sting that you will not forget. Please don't hurt the velvet ants. They are good, but they are not to be trifled with. One of my very favorite insects is the hoverfly. Hoverflies are really neat because they are wasp mimics. What do I mean by wasp mimics? Well, they try to look like wasps to keep other insects from bothering them. And would you want to bother this guy? Certainly not when you first see it. The first thing I'm sure you thought was, oh, that's a tiny bee, or that's a tiny wasp. But they're not. These are actually flies. The way you can tell they're flies is to look at their eyes. And actually, if you look very closely, you can see that just like craneflies, they only have that one set of wings. Because they only have one set of wings, and their second set, again known as halteres, these balancing structures, they are wonderful flyers. In fact, of all the flies that I know, hoverflies might be the fastest and most sudden flyers that I've ever seen. Really fun thing to watch. But make sure you look at their eyes and identify them as a hoverfly before you try and catch them. Hoverflies will not sting. This is a bumblebee. Bumblebees fly all around your garden, pollinating all of your different flowers. They are very fun to watch, and they're often confused with our next insect, the carpenter bee. Now, the carpenter bee might be the worst insect that I have up here. Why is it the worst insect? Well, not because it's a bad guy. I like carpenter bees, but because sometimes they'll get into things that we'd rather they not get into. They're called carpenter bees because they like to bore into wood. At the botanical gardens, we've actually had quite a bit of problems, or quite a number of problems with the carpenter bees, because they will actually bore holes in our benches, and they drive us absolutely nuts. When we put in new benches now, we try and have those new benches made out of metal and concrete, because we really just don't want these guys leaving holes in all of our outdoor furniture. That said, they are fun to watch, and like bumblebees, they'll go to all kinds of different flowers. Ladybird beetles are a very exciting insect to find, and they're all over the place right now. Now, there are over 200 types of ladybird beetles in the United States. This one is a 7-spotted lady beetle. It used to be very common in the United States, but recently we've had an Asian lady beetle come in, which does similar things to the 7-spotted lady beetle. But is actually a little bit better at it, so we actually see fewer 7-spotted lady beetles than we used to. Lady beetle larvae actually look like tiny little alligators and do a wonderful job of eating bad insects. The adult ladybird beetle does a great job of eating bad insects too, but probably not quite as effective as the larva. The larva actually tends to be more effective predators. Believe it or not, there is actually a type of ladybird beetle which is black with red spots. There are also ladybird beetles which are brown, and there's even a type of ladybird beetle which is a pest on crops. And finally, I wanted to finish with one of the most interesting little wasps out there. It's metallic parasitoid wasps, and you can also call them a cuckoo wasp, so you can look up cuckoo wasps if you want to find out more about these. These little tiny wasps can actually parasitize other wasps and eat them. Very neat insect. You won't see them all over the place, but when you do see them, they're really, really special. You can see how they're so striking on a flower. Well, thank you all for joining me today. It has been super fun talking to you about insects. When this quarantine lifts, I hope that y'all will come out and visit the gardens. But in the meantime, get out there into your backyard and take a look at all the amazing insects that live there. I look forward to talking with you soon.